Very much for that. My name is Mark Lomas, Cloud Lead here at ProBrand, and welcome to our webinar on cloud telephony for small business. Today, I'm going to begin with a short introduction to the topic of cloud telephony and why you might want to move your business PBX to the cloud. We'll look at some of the key drivers why many organizations are exploring cloud telephony right now, and then we'll take a look at a popular choice for many small to medium-sized businesses, Microsoft 365 Business Voice, a full cloud PBX solution integrated with Microsoft Teams as part of Microsoft 365. We'll also be exploring some of the hardware choices available to make use of as part of your cloud phone service and why you might want to include and consider hardware as part of your cloud phone system journey. And finally, we'll take a look at a demo of the Microsoft Teams Voice Admin Center to highlight how easy it is to administer and work with this cloud PBX solution. First, let's talk about why many small businesses are moving to a cloud phone system at the moment. For many organizations over the last year, they've made a shift from office-based working to home-based working. Whilst many organizations are already starting to look forward to a shift back to office-based working, either in full or in part, it will still be key to maintain flexibility in the IT systems that you make use of. This flexibility has been something that many organizations have had to rely on quite heavily over the last year, with some organizations making use of remote access technologies to ensure that your staff have been able to continue to access IT systems running on premises. Other organizations have moved wholesale to the cloud to ensure native internet-based access to its services from anywhere for their employee base. Telephony, however, has been a little bit more tricky to deal with. Many organizations still have an on-premises based PBX. Some organizations have been a little more fortunate in that they have a software-based phone system that can be more easily accessed from outside the office. However, not everyone has the luxury of such a deployment, with many organizations also having a more traditional business PBX that can only really be accessed using desk phones in the office. Even for those users with a software-based phone service, it has not always presented the most ideal experience, with the software phone client sometimes only able to deliver a small subset of the functionality that would otherwise be available in the office. As such, many businesses have been forced to make use of a variety of workarounds. This has sometimes involved the use of forwarding calls to mobiles or other similar approaches. The overall functionality available to both your internal staff and the experience provided to customers is therefore reduced, with many organizations experiencing a difficulty in transferring or conferencing calls, routing calls to staff, and for those organizations that have departmental calls to handle, it can be a particular challenge ensuring that incoming calls to a group of people can still be routed to those staff members. To help solve these headaches and challenges, many organizations are looking to a cloud phone system. Just as with cloud IT, a cloud phone system provides native work anywhere communication and calling. Staff can log on to the cloud phone service from any device in any location where an internet connection is available, regardless of whether the user is making use of a soft phone or a hardware device. They have full functionality available to them. Incoming calls that need to be routed to a group of users can be handled regardless of where those users are located. Call transfers can be completed easily since you're working with a cloud phone system that spans all of your users, again regardless of location. Conferencing in additional users to a single call is an easy and straightforward task. And menu-based handling of incoming calls allows for easy routing of those calls to the right department or staff member with no need for any forwarding to a mobile. Another reason why some organizations are starting to look at making a change is the end of ISDN. Many organizations still rely on ISDN lines to provide their on-premises phone line service. And with this service due to be retired in the next few years, it's important to consider how this will impact your phone service. Whilst there are alternatives that can be considered on premises, it makes a natural junction point to look at a more comprehensive solution. This lets you switch away from ISDN and move to a cloud service that isn't location dependent, with all the benefits referred to on the previous slide. So let's take a look at a popular cloud phone system, Microsoft 365 Business Voice. Microsoft 365 Business Voice delivers a full cloud phone system based on Microsoft Teams. Many of you will already be familiar with Microsoft Teams and may already be using it in your organization for internal communications and for meetings and video conferences with customers, partners, and suppliers. You might also be using Microsoft Teams for internet-based calling and communications with external contacts. With Microsoft 365 Business Voice, you can also use Microsoft Teams to make and receive regular PSTN phone calls. As you'll see throughout this webinar, there's much more to 365 Business Voice than simply making and receiving calls. The service offers a full business PBX with auto-attendant capability, call queues and call routing features, and so much more. We'll be able to take a look at some more of these features in the demo later in the webinar. From the perspective of the end user, if the 365 Business Voice licenses are assigned to them, they'll see the dial pad here in the Microsoft Teams client, alongside their direct dial number shown here too. Because this is a cloud service, the user can sign into Microsoft Teams from any device that they have access to and make and receive calls from those devices, whether it be PC, Mac, iOS, or Android. When the user receives an inbound call, that call will ring on all of the devices that they're logged into. The user can then choose to answer that call on whichever device they prefer in that moment. Let's take a quick look at some of the calling features available to end users inside the Microsoft Teams software on a Windows machine. So we're here in Microsoft Teams and we're in the calls section, which you access through this icon on the left-hand toolbar. You can see here that, as mentioned, we've got the dial pad activated and there's my DDI showing here. This is how callers can reach me if they want to phone me directly. And there's a few sections here that you might expect to see in a typical soft phone client. So we've got this speed dial section that we're in here at the moment, and you can add your own speed dials in here and group them together. So we've got this sort of speed dial group, favorites, etc. And you can expand and collapse these, create new groups if you need to, just to make it easier to get hold of the contacts that you use most often. And then we've got the full contacts list here, which of course is synchronized with Microsoft Outlook. We go into the history section here. We've got a history of inbound and outbound calls. And then we've got the voicemail section here as well. And so we can look at the voicemails that we've received. And if you click on them, you also get a transcription of voicemails that have come through. If I click on my icon here in the top right and click on settings, we can also administer a few of our own settings here for calls. So this is the kind of thing that I, as an individual user, might want to configure myself. So the sort of standard default is that when a call comes in, it rings. But of course, you might want to forward your calls externally. So you might want to send calls direct to voicemail. So if you're going to be away on holiday for a while, you might want to just send all calls to voicemail and then set up a custom greeting. But you can forward them to somebody else. So you can set them to forward to a group, or you can forward your calls to a contact, whatever you prefer. So if someone's covering your calls during a holiday period, for example, you can forward through to them. The default for any call that's unanswered after a period is, of course, to go to voicemail, and you can configure your voicemail here as well. So if I click on the configure voicemail button, I can record a greeting, or indeed I can type a greeting if I wish to. So at the moment I've got a customized greeting in here, but I can type my own greeting in if I want to let the system read a greeting out for me. So these are some of the settings and the experiences that you can access inside the Microsoft Teams client itself. Very easy to use, very easy to work with. And of course, this client is available across Mac, and it's available on smartphones and tablets across iOS and Android as well. We'll be moving on to a demo of the Teams admin experience later in the webinar. But now that we've taken a look at some of the basic functionality, let's have a little bit more of a delve into what the 365 Business Voice license actually is and some of the capabilities that you might want to be aware of if you're thinking about deploying this solution in your own environment. The license is simply called Microsoft 365 Business Voice, and it's what we call a per user add-on license. What this means is that you add it on for users who already have Microsoft Teams. Of course, this means the user must have Teams service to begin with, so they'll need a base license that provides them with that. 365 Business Voice is a small business product, and Microsoft classed this as anything up to 300 users. For customers above this, there's a different license set that you'd be utilizing. Unlike a traditional on-premises phone system, where part of the package will involve paying for lines or numbers, with Microsoft 365 Business Voice, just like many other cloud telephony solutions, you're paying a simple per user per month subscription fee. Indeed, with 365 Business Voice, you can have as many numbers as you like allocated to your Microsoft tenancy for no additional cost. So setting up extra numbers for different departments, a customer services number, or an emergency out of hours number wouldn't cost you any extra. Even numbers sat spare in your account require no additional fees. It's your users that you pay for, not the numbers. As mentioned, this is normally £12 per user per month, but there's a promotion running currently until the end of April, reducing this price to £9 per user per month. Ordering before that end of April cutoff will secure you that lower price for a full 12 months. So if you're not paying for lines and numbers, how do you cover the cost of calls? Well, as mentioned, there's no line rental and no charge for phone numbers. And also note that you can absolutely port over your existing phone numbers to this solution, so you can keep all your current numbers if you switch. Microsoft 365 Business Voice includes 1,200 domestic minutes per user to cover outbound calling. These minutes are pooled across your entire Microsoft tenancy and shared between all users with a 365 Business Voice license. International calls can be covered either with pay-as-you-go communication credit, which would be most appropriate for users making only occasional calls to other countries, or through the add-on of an international calling plan, which provides each user with 600 international minutes per month. Pay-as-you-go communication credit also has a couple of additional uses for other out-of-plan costs. This can include things like calls to 0870 numbers, and you can also use communication credit to cover inbound calls if you'd like to set up a free phone number. There are some additional scenarios that 365 Business Voice can also cover. First, there are certain situations where you may need to place a desk phone in a location inside your office that doesn't belong to a specific user. For example, you might need to place a phone at an unattended reception, or in a canteen or workshop, or even in a corridor for emergency use. These phones are of course not going to be logged on with a named user account, so you wouldn't want to pay for a full 365 license and a full Business Voice license just to cover these locations. Instead, Microsoft have a lower cost option, a single license they refer to as the Common Area Phone license. This provides a device-based license for exactly these situations. There's also another scenario that requires device-based licensing, and that's meeting room and conference facilities. For these sort of situations, a common area phone license might not provide the functionality you need. Instead, Microsoft have the Teams Rooms license. This device-based license allows you to cover these locations and also includes a mailbox, which in turn means you get a calendar allowing you to book these facilities for meetings and conferences that you arrange. Speaking of devices, hardware is an important factor in a cloud phone system solution. Whilst a traditional desk phone might not seem like a natural component when moving to cloud telephony, it can in fact enable a much richer experience and add further functionality for how the end user handles their communications. So let's take a look at some of the options you might want to consider when delivering the right hardware for a cloud phone service. There are many Teams certified desk phones available, such as the Poly CCX. Shown here is the CCX 500, and as you can see, it removes traditional buttons for a more modern touchscreen interface. The phone is running a special Teams client, which allows the user to simply log in and make and receive calls. And because the phone is running Teams, you can participate in inbound and outbound PSTN calls, but also Teams meetings and internet calls too. These phones don't require any additional hardware or servers to operate. They simply log in over the internet to the Microsoft Cloud service, and in turn, that means you can utilize them from anywhere, even a home office. Consider that these devices can operate even when your PC is switched off or running updates, and that it can act as a connection point for a headset, and it's easy to see why this can be an attractive choice. Other hardware options are available as well, including for meeting rooms and conference facilities, all of which can participate in a Microsoft Teams environment that leverages Business Voice for calling. Of course, for small meeting rooms, you might simply use an entry-level CCX phone and make use of its speakerphone function. For larger rooms, you might make use of one of these Poly Trio devices up in the top left here. Again, you can see that it has a touchscreen user interface similar to the CCX phones. And then there's devices available for larger conference facilities, including webcam and speakerphone devices with control panel solutions. It's not just bigger brother devices you might want to consider. Some users are happy making use of a speakerphone built into their laptop or tablet. However, some might find that the quality of the integrated microphone and speaker can let them down. Personal speakerphone devices like this PolySync can be a great upgrade. And finally, there's a variety of headsets, both wired and wireless, mono and stereo to choose from. Regardless of which hardware you choose, just note that with a cloud-based phone system like 365 Business Voice, you'll have access to a higher quality of audio in the service. So to make use of this, good quality hardware can make all the difference. Moving on from the different hardware options, let's take a look behind the scenes at some of the business functionality available in 365 Business Voice and how you can administer it. A business phone service is about more than just the ability to make and receive calls. You also need sophisticated call management to deliver additional features and a professional experience for callers. So for example, you might have a main line for your business. Some businesses might prefer those inbound calls to be handled by a dedicated receptionist, but you might have more than one person who needs to be able to answer calls or special handling of inbound calls when you have a rush of callers. You might prefer that inbound calls ring through to a team of people to allow a larger pool of call handling. Or you might want to set up a call menu system for inbound callers to allow calls to be routed to the right department. 365 Business Voice supports all of these requirements, including combining some of them together for sophisticated solutions. Today, we'll take a look at the Teams Admin Center to give you a bit of an overview of some of the features available. So whilst we're not intending to give you a full training session here of all of the features, it'll give you a flavor of how certain elements of it are set up. So we're here in the Teams Admin Center. You can access this from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center by just going into the Teams link in the Admin Center section here. Now, in order to administer the voice side of Microsoft Teams, we've got this voice section on the left-hand side, and there's a number of different areas that we can take a quick look at here. And as mentioned, we're not going to have time to go through absolutely everything today, but let's go through some of the basics. We've got the phone numbers section here, fairly straightforward area where we can add new numbers into our tenancy, or we can port existing ones. It's very easy to work with these numbers. You can select a number here, click on edit, and we can assign spare numbers that we have through to users. Search for a user and assign it. And it's very easy to work with in this regard. So assigning and unassigning numbers, very straightforward thing to do. And when you want to add numbers, you can just click the add button and you're away adding additional numbers to your service. So pretty straightforward to work with here. There's also additional settings that we can take a look at here. So we can take a look at things like dial plans. We can take a look at voice routing policies. There's sections in here for caller ID policies, which defines how our numbers appear externally. So there's a variety of different components here, but the two that I want to take a quick look at today are call queues and auto attendance. So call queues, sometimes referred to as hunt groups, this allows us to set up an inbound call to ring a group of users, to hunt through users until somebody picks up and answers. And this might be useful if you just want a departmental number, a sales line or a technical support line. It might be useful if you've got a call center and you want calls to be routed to call handling agents that you have in that call center. There's a variety of different settings available here. Let's take a look at how easy it is to set one of these up. If I click on add, I can give my call queue a name. I'll just say test for now. Now, one of the things that you have to do with these things when you're setting up call queues and auto attendance is you have to add what they call a resource account. A resource account basically defines the entity of this call queue in as your Active Directory, which is of course the foundation for pretty much everything that you do up in the cloud. So we have to have a resource account. If you've already created one, you can go ahead and search for it here. If you haven't created one, then you've got this option to add a resource account here, give it a name, select the type of resource account that you're creating. Obviously this would be a call queue, and then we can create it. I'm not going to create this now because we're just looking at this for test purposes, but we can go through and look at the rest of the settings. Obviously you want to set a language. This is useful for any read out prompts that the system is going to be producing for us. So we just want to say English United Kingdom here for now. You can decide whether or not a greeting is played to a caller that dials in. Now you may not want a greeting because you might have used an auto attendant, a menu-based system, to route calls through to this call queue, in which case all of your announcements might have already been handled by the auto attendant already. But if people are going to be dialing in directly into this call queue, you might want an announcement, in which case you can say play an audio file. There's music on hold, so when people are on hold waiting for the call to be answered, you've got default music on hold, or you can upload your own. So if you're having some professional recordings done for this, you can do so. And then we need to decide who's going to be in this call queue, who is going to be getting the calls routed to them. So we can add users and groups in here. So let's just add myself in for now. So I'll just search for Mark Lomas and add myself in. and then hit add. And you can see it adds me into the queue, and you've got the option to move up and move down. Now the order makes a difference down here for the routing method. So you can choose how the calls are routed through. Attendant routing simply means everybody is called. And the first person to pick up gets the call. But then you've got other routing like serial routing, where it will just go through each person in turn. You've got round robin, where it will make sure that everyone gets an even number of calls, and you've got longest idles. You've got a variety of different options here for how calls are handled. And if you are operating a call center, then things like serial routing and round robin might be more applicable. If you're just running something like, say, a sales line, you want everybody to get the call, someone picks it up, you might want to go with attendant routing. You've got various different options here. Presence-based routing, if you turn this on, it means that calls will only go through to agents if they are set to available in Microsoft Teams, whether or not you want to allow people to opt out of calls, and how long the call alert rings before you overflow and go into timeout, for example. You can define how many calls can be in the queue, up to 200, and then what happens if you get beyond the maximum limit in your queue. You redirect to someone else, redirect to a voicemail. You can do all sorts of different things here as to what happens if you run out of slots, shall we say, in your call queue. And then what happens if people are waiting too long. So you can set a maximum wait time, and again, you can decide what happens when you violate that wait time. Maybe people get routed to voicemail, for example, so that they can leave a message. So you've got all sorts of different options here. But as you can see, it's pretty easy to set up a hunt group. It's pretty easy to set this up. You just need to set a few settings, add some people in, and you're away. Very easy to set these things up. Menu-based systems are just as easy to work with, albeit there's a few additional options that you might want to define here. Let's go ahead and have a look. Again, we need to give our auto attendant a name, and we can decide whether there's an operator assigned to the auto attendant. So if you choose that there's going to be an operator, then one of your menu options might be to say you want to give people the opportunity to be routed through to an operator. Press 0 to speak to reception, for example, in which case you can choose a person in the organization that is going to be the call handler. You can choose an external phone number if you wish to, or you could choose what they call a voice app. A voice app is simply another auto attendant or another call queue that you've already set up. So if you've already got a call queue set up, then you can choose that. In this case, I'm just going to say no operator. Time zone, that will be important, as we'll see a little bit later on. I'm just going to choose the UK here, language UK, and you can, if you want to, enable voice inputs so that people can speak the menu option that they wish to choose. Then we come into the call flow, the actual process itself. And this is where we can choose things like our greeting for display to the caller when they call in. And you can type a greeting, or you can play an audio file. So if you've got a professional recording to upload, you can do so, or you can type a greeting in, which could be, "Welcome to ProBrand, please choose from the menu," and then you can type in exactly what instructions you want to read out to the caller. Then you can route the call. You can choose to have it immediately redirected to someone in the organization. Again, it can go through to somebody, or it can go through to voicemail, it can go through to a voice app like a call queue, or we can play menu options at this point. And at this stage, again, we can upload an audio file to describe to callers what the menu options are, or we can type a greeting message in, which might be press 1 for sales, 2 for technical, etc., etc. You can type in exactly what the menu options are that you want people to have, and that will then be read out. It's a text-to-speech system that will read this out when somebody calls in. And away we go. We can start putting in our dial keys here. We've obviously got 0 to 9, so we could say 1, and we can go through to a voice app. So let's have a look. I think we've already got one defined for sales. Let's see if it's already in here. Sales inbound, so we can choose that, and that's available, and then we can put in additional menu options as preferred, and it will then route through to the relevant person, the relevant voicemail, the relevant call queue as we define in here. We can even set up a directory search, so we can allow people to dial by extension or dial by name the person that they wish to search for, or we can have no directory search. We don't have to have that option, but it is a feature that is available here that you can allow people to actually search for a specific individual within the organization. On the next screen, if we just move through to the subsequent section, we can define business hours. So you might, for example, want to have these menu options available to callers during your working hours And if somebody calls outside of working hours, they get a message saying, you know, we're currently closed for the day. Please leave a message or phone back during our working hours. And this allows you to define that. So you can define what your working hours are. You can even define multiple slots with the add new time feature here. And this allows you to have those settings configured as to what happens during hours and then out of hours. We can even set additional call flow during holidays, that a specific set of call handling will occur during Christmas, for example. So you can define in advance those holidays, and the system will automatically handle calls differently as they come through. The dial scope allows us to define who is in our directory and who is not. So if we want to have directory search, we might, for example, not want everybody to be accessible through the directory. You might not, for example, want people to be able to just search for the director of the business by using the directory search feature. So you can define who's included and who isn't. And then on the final screen here, the resource account, just as is the case with a call queue, you have to associate an auto attendant with an account within the system to be able to set this up. And once you do that, you can then finalize the definition, and your auto attendant will then be available. You can then assign a phone number to that auto attendant by going back to the phone numbers section up here at the top. You'll be able to assign a phone number to that call queue, to that resource account, and you're away. And you're in business. And of course, the auto attendant itself then exists as a voice app. So if you want to have nested menus where you have multiple layers of menus inside the system, then you can have an auto attendant, one of the dial options, one of your press a key, 1, 2, 3, etc., can then go through to further submenus if you prefer. So you can create some complex routing scenarios if you need that kind of configuration in your environment. Now, one other thing that I'm going to point out to you here as well is that you remember the desk phones, some of the hardware that we looked at earlier in the presentation, things Teams certified desk phones like the CCX and the Poly Trio that we saw earlier. These things actually are administered through Microsoft Teams. Again, you don't need to set up some additional cloud service with the vendor or run a server or anything. All of these phones actually get logged into Microsoft Teams. So if we go into the IP phones section under devices here, we'll see one of our devices. It's actually currently offline at the moment. It's one of the CCX 500 phones. And you've got the option to administer the device through this environment. You can do things like run updates, you can configure its settings, you can push policies down to it, assign tags, assign configurations. There's all sorts of different things that you can do through this user interface. So this then becomes the environment that you're administering, not just your voice service with 365 Business Voice, but it also becomes the environment through which you administer all of your hardware, all of the kit that you've got out in your estate. So this becomes a one-stop shop and a single pane of glass for all of that administration work. And of course, as with many things in Microsoft 365 these days, you're able to carry out administration not just through this web-based GUI, but you're also able to use PowerShell scripts and PowerShell commands to carry out repetitive tasks in a faster way if you need to do that as well. So all of that can be administered through PowerShell. Hopefully that's given you a good demo of just a few of the capabilities that you have up in Microsoft 365 in the admin center there. And as you can see, you've got a straightforward and friendly graphical user interface environment via which you can make changes. So this is no longer a kind of smoke and mirrors thing where you need to have sort of specialist engineering capabilities in order to administer and work with the environment. It's a very easy and straightforward environment to work with. So let's summarize what we've looked at today. Microsoft 365 Business Voice offers a full cloud phone service for small businesses for up to 300 users. It's a comprehensive solution covering everything from users needing to make and receive calls, to meeting rooms where you need a full suite of conferencing facilities, right down to shared or common area phones that you might need, like unattended receptions or phones in corridors. It allows people to log in on any device, whether it's PC, Mac, iOS, Android, and allows them to log in from anywhere where they've got an internet connection. It provides full business PBX capabilities with auto attendants, call queues, and full call routing management, allowing you to deliver a professional service for inbound callers. And there's a range of hardware options supported as well, with everything from desk phones to conference room facilities to headsets. This important aspect of a cloud phone service solution makes sure that people get to take full advantage of the capabilities that are available to them, regardless of the state that their PC or other device might be in. If you're looking at moving to a cloud phone service solution, ProBrain can help. We've got a range of services that we can offer to assist you in your journey to a cloud PBX. First, we can help you with the assessment of your requirements. What do you need out of a cloud phone service? How are people going to be interacting with voice? What kind of inbound call experience do you want to provide? ProBrain can help review your requirements in this area. We can also propose a full solution. We can put together a full solution package with all of the licensing, hardware and services that you need, with competitive pricing for the equipment, and our ProBrain CSP platform can be used to deliver the software licensing in a fully flexible manner. Ask your account manager for more details and a demo of the CSP environment. We can also deliver a design and management service. We can help design the call routing and the experience that your callers will have when they're dialing in. We can provide number porting services and full project management to map out the implementation. And of course, our engineers can provide full deployment and support services. Our engineers have a high level of experience in delivering these solutions, and we can provide the ongoing support to look after you and your phone service. That brings us to the end of our presentation for today. I hope you found it useful. We're now going to hand back to the moderator for a Q&A section, but for now, thank you very much.
Great presentation, Mark. Thank you very much for that. To our webinar guests, I hope that the presentation gave you some insight over the steps that you can take to overcome your telephony headaches. Now it's time for a Q&A. We've got a question from Jackie, who asks, hi, are calls to mobile phones included in additional, or is it additional?
Hi, yeah, no, calls to mobiles in the UK are included in your domestic calling plan, so that would be considered geographically local to the UK, and so that would be included. You'd only be charged extra for calls to international mobile phones, for example, and obviously, as mentioned, that can either be covered via communication credits or via an international calling plan.
Thanks, Mark. Jackie asked a second question. She asked, in call queue, is there an option to set up a rota system? For example, calls to reception being forwarded to person A Monday morning and person B Monday afternoon, etc.
This would probably be something that we could handle by combining an auto attendant with a call queue. As you saw there during the demo, there are ways to configure an auto attendant to handle routing differently at different times of the day. So by combining these, we could probably come up with a call routing solution that would do that, that would route calls differently at different times of the day. An auto attendant doesn't have to be a menu system. It can purely be a way of saying, right, I've got an incoming call and it's a particular time of day, therefore I want to route it to person A, and it's a different time of day, I want to route it to person B, etc. So yes, I would have thought that we could do that using an auto attendant to set that up.
Thanks, Mark. Someone else also asked, please could you advise about call recording options?
Yeah, sure. So with the call recording solution, it has become a little bit more simplified lately because it used to require some extra licensing from Microsoft. Microsoft's view of call recording is that it's something that is generally being done for compliancy, security purposes. And their view of this, of course, is that, you know, we're talking about Microsoft Teams here, and that PSTN calling is just one type of calling that you could be placing through Microsoft Teams. You could be placing internet-based calling by putting in somebody's email address. You could be arranging a conversation with someone via a conference that you've arranged, you've scheduled, even if it's just a one-to-one, you might have booked something in with them via Microsoft Teams. And of course, that's not going over PSTN. So Microsoft's view of this, and I guess I would agree with this to a certain extent, is that you're looking at the call recording as being something that is delivered across all of the communications that you might have with customers, partners, suppliers, etc. Now, it still requires the addition of a third-party service. The orchestration of the call recording is handled by the Microsoft platform, so you can set up policies within Microsoft to define where you would attach a call recorder to a call, which calls you would want to be covered by a recording. So you can set policies policies up in the Microsoft system. And then once the call recorder is attached, that's a sort of third-party call recorder that will then handle the call recording for you and deliver that functionality to record the calls. Those call recording services will usually provide a range of additional functionality. It might include things like analytics of your calls. It might include sentiment analysis of calls that have been recorded. It might include integration with your CRM solutions. So there's a whole range of additional things that can be done once you have that in place. But yeah, Microsoft will orchestrate that as a policy, and then you're bringing in a third-party call recorder to attach that service.
Thanks, Mark. The last question from Christy. Can we use our existing phone numbers, landline and mobile?
I guess that sounds like a little bit of a two-part question. Firstly, if you're talking about moving your existing numbers over to the Microsoft service where through a process that's called number porting, yes, that's absolutely possible. So we can manage that process for you of creating a number port order and having that transferred over. Usually it would take anywhere between sort of 14 days, maybe 30 days to get the transfer completed. What we generally will do for a lot of customers when we're setting the service up is we will establish the service first using temporary numbers so that we can make sure everything's working right, that the auto attendance, call queues, everything is in place correctly. And then when the numbers cut over, we can then just assign them to that structure that's already in place. So we have a very, very rapid way of transferring the numbers over. So we can port existing numbers over to the service. And yes, that can include mobile numbers as well. If you're talking about using your existing lines and keeping the lines that you have on premises and integrating that with the service, that's a slightly different approach. Microsoft support this through a mechanism called direct routing to sort of create a hybrid configuration between your existing on-premises service and the cloud. But we tend to find that we get the best results when we just go with the all-inclusive solution of 365 Business Voice and doing all of our calling up in the cloud using that service. And if that's the route that you're going, then yes, you can absolutely transfer your numbers over.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks everyone for your questions. That's all we've got time for today. We're going to have to come to a close. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be sending via email a copy of the presentation and the recording to all of our attendees. If you have any further questions or need anything explaining further, please do not hesitate to give us a call on 0808 501 6389. That's 0808 501 6389, or just drop me an email. Thank you everyone for joining us. See you.